Thank you very much, Ellen, for agreeing to talk to us today. And welcome everyone to today's episode of the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. It's a rare privilege to have someone who have experience as a practitioner, a researcher, and a lecturer with good experience across the country, but also some experiences beyond Ghana on today's podcast. Welcome to the show, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Senyo. Thank you.
Yeah, and some of our audience, or I should assume a lot of them, unless they have been reading and following conversations on teacher professional development, which you have published widely on. Some of our audience may be hearing your name for the first time and be wondering who you are. Would you mind giving us a brief about your background, your interests and experiences, and what you do?
Okay, thanks. I must say I feel honored to be on this podcast. The last I was on a podcast like this, I think it was when I was in my PhD. It just brought back memories.
Yeah.
But then, hey, to your audience, my name is Ellen Abakah. So I'm a Ghanaian. My background spanned from my life during my undergraduate studies with the University of Ghana. So I obtained my first degree with the University of Ghana, having pursued history and sociology. From then, I continued with my master's also at the University of Ghana, and I read MPhil in adult education. And then I had, I think I served with the UG for a while as an assistant lecturer, and then I left for my PhDs in Australia somewhere in 2016. I came back after my PhD studies, and then I'm currently a faculty member with the Department of Adult Education at the University of Ghana. My research interest, I say I'm an adult educator, and as part of what adult education does is the issue of continuing professional development. So as part of my PhD studies, I kind of like looked at teacher learning and continuing professional development among teachers in Ghana. So my research trajectory has actually spanned from my MPhil studies, where I looked at women and gender issues, and then I kind of like, I wouldn't say I diverged or kind of like I ran away from gender stuff. I still do gender issues as well. But then in much recent, my interest has really focused on looking at issues of developing teachers professionally as far as their careers and their professionalism is concerned within the Ghanaian space. So briefly, that's what I would say about myself.
Thank you so much. That is refreshing to hear about your background, starting your tertiary education from the University of Ghana, but also coming back to continue your studies, and then after your PhD, giving back to the same institution that trained you as a student. So thanks for the good work. It's interesting to learn about your research experience as well, and I think that there is a good intersection between education and gender issues, and education actually would be of gender equality and women empowerment. So like you said, you haven't digressed at all. You're still in the field and doing amazing work. Now let's get into the discussion, especially that you mentioned your area of interest is in teacher professional development. Our audience cut across about 66 countries, and not all of them are in Africa. And this conversation is around teacher professional development in Ghana. Can you paint a picture of the state of teachers in Ghana? If someone is interested in how is teaching like in Ghana, what are the conditions of teachers in Ghana? What do they feel? What do they think? What would be your response?
Okay, so with teachers in Ghana, I mean, and especially I would kind of limit the conversation around Ghana specifically, but then most teachers in developing countries, our problems kind of resonate with other developing countries. Mm-hmm. So what actually even kind of spurred my interest in looking at this area is the lower academic levels of our students, especially at the basic level. And at the end of it all, the blame falls on the laps of these teachers. So currently, if you look at teachers in Ghana, they do not kind of like receive good public imagery as far as their quality is concerned. And if you look at works that have been done on teacher preparation, I mean, it's kind of like list some of these challenges that teachers face: the lack of remuneration, high teacher attrition, the fact that their preparation are deficient in to some sort. Of course, over the years, we've aimed at educational reforms that seeks to kind of like increase or kind of like enhance the caliber of the quality of teachers that we produce within the Ghanaian education system. But then, believe you me, the quality of teachers in terms of even which category of students are recruited at this to go into teacher education, it's kind of a problem. At the end of the day, I remember a study by a champion talking about the fact that compared teacher preparation, that is students that we pick up to go into teaching, to university students, their standards are always on the lower side. You can go into teacher training with a good D, meanwhile, university won't pick you. So apart from the fact that we have low quality of students who we pick up to train as teachers, there are also issues of lack of motivation, lack of infrastructure, and then most importantly to me, the fact that the whole teacher education system and their preparation kind of like seem to focus much more on theory. So we often find teachers go into their classroom and they are found wanting. And for me, that was the genesis of my interest in teacher professional development. So at the end of the day, if we have teachers who are prepared like that, how then do we support such teachers in their entire trajectory of their profession in order to give their best to increase students' learning outcomes? So that's what I would say as the current state of teachers in Ghana. The fact that they are trained, their preparation have always been questionable in terms of the number of the caliber of students that we enroll in there. But then, having said that, and as I said earlier, there have been educational reforms that have all directed or targeted at kind of like equipping them with 21st century competencies and skills. But then these challenges are widespread. These challenges are something that we cannot run away from. And as I said also, it doesn't only resonate with the Ghanaian context, but then it's a problem that most sub-Saharan African countries or most developing countries face as far as teacher preparation and the whole face or imagery of teachers are concerned.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I do agree with you when you say that poor learning outcomes is often blamed at the feet of teachers. So, I mean, when people are looking at bad results, they lay the blame on teachers to assume that it's the teachers that are not training the student or teaching well, while sometimes ignoring other factors that does affect learning outcomes. But also you have touched on the quality of training we give to teachers, which is an issue. But like you rightly mentioned, there's been some reforms. I think in a few weeks ago, I was speaking with TTEL, and they did highlight how they are changing teacher training, pre-service teacher training, to make teachers better prepared to deliver better quality learning outcomes for pupils. And thanks for touching on that. Relating to what you said about the image of teachers, or teachers seen less as reputable or professional. And I mean, having been a teacher myself and going through different classrooms, you as a teacher ask your children or your pupils, how many of them want to be teachers? And I mean,
no, I would say yes.
And lucky enough, you may get one person. And I did follow up to one of my students who was strong about never becoming a teacher. And he said teachers are not well paid. And I think that is how much people know. But the question is, how can we make teaching a more attractive career option to attract the best and brightest of our potentials into this profession? Because a lot depends on them, given that they are the people who shape the future trajectory and academic progress of our pupils.
Oh yes, judging from the rules, I mean, teachers really play indispensable role in our lives. And growing up, one phrase that always kind of like caught my attention was, if you can't read this, then you thank a teacher. And as you rightfully said, you'll be lucky to have one person who would want to be a teacher like you, if you ask your own student. But then the question is, how do we motivate, or how do we make the teaching profession as a career? And personally, I teach at the university, so I'm still a teacher.
Yeah.
The key thing that was with the lower remuneration that comes with the profession. So in order to make it attractive, the first thing that I would talk about is providing a very competitive salary in order not to only attract younger ones to come into the teaching profession, but to also retain those who are already in it. The higher attrition among teacher population or teacher workforce is that they find greener pastures somewhere. The salaries are not forthcoming. It's nothing to write home about. So when they get better opportunities, they just leave. And surprisingly, when I was doing my research, this issue of teachers using even their study leave as a springboard to pursue other greener kind of like careers. So they would take study leave, go for higher education in a different area without bearing on what they do in the classroom, and then boom, they leave. So if we offer them a competitive salary, not only will we be able to attract people to come in there, but we will also be able to retain them within their profession. And another thing I would also talk about is like providing these teachers with a highly effective professional development opportunities to support them as far as their growth and development is concerned. And you can't fault parents, you can't fault the Ghanaian populace when they kind of lump all the blame on the laps of these teachers as far as lower academic achievements are concerned. Because at the end of the day, with all the factors that we can compare to improve educational outcome, we cannot actually overlook the quality of teachers as supreme amongst them. So that in order to increase that reputation of these teachers, let's equip these teachers with a very efficacious professional development opportunities that would ensure that they are of higher quality, they are teachers better suitable to be in 21st century classrooms setting. And then also being a woman and talking from gender perspective, I would also talk about, and you know, in Ghana, we often see teachers to be the role or to be a career most suitable for women. So then let's have policies, let's implement policies that will promote the work-life balance of these women that are into this profession. And then finally, I would add that we should ensure that teachers have all the tools. They have access to the tools, whatever resources, whatever necessary equipment or teaching and learning materials, including technology that they need to be able to perform effectively and deliver on their instruction. I mean, it will sadden you to know that you go to some communities, you go to some schools, and the real basic instrument, the real basic resources that teachers need to perform their roles effectively are not at their disposal. And I found that I came across that scenario a lot when I was collecting data for my studies, where teachers haven't even participated in CPD opportunities. They do not even have the resources where they can reenact what was learned at their various CPD sessions or the various CPD activities they participated in. So when it happens like that, you are truncating the learning. You are not giving them opportunities to contextualize what they learn at the various CPD sessions to implement that in the classroom to affect students' learning. So I think when we follow through with all these 4 things that I have come across, in a way, we'll be able to at least increase the image, or we'll be able to make the teaching profession a little bit more attractive to get the younger ones into the profession.
Yeah, that was quite a comprehensive list of ideas and quite insightful. The main question is the readiness of duty bearers or policymakers to actually take this up and implement it. And something like remuneration, I think that whenever you bring the issue of teacher remuneration to policymakers, the first thing they would usually say is that teachers are huge and the public wage bill is huge.
Oh, yes.
When you're increasing the salary of teachers by even 10 cities, that is a huge amount of money, and it's a difficult thing to do. But we have recently seen with lots of other countries, including Rwanda that has significantly increased teacher remuneration. I think that is a matter of political will and considering the place of teachers. It's on record that one of the leaders had mentioned that teaching is not a profession you go in and expect to make money, which is, not the driving force is going to teaching. It's not necessarily to make money, but teachers deserve better salaries and deserve a good remuneration, like you have mentioned. Aside every other thing you have mentioned, I think this is a really important thing, especially given the associated concerns with teacher attrition and low motivation. And now let's move on. And we have just mentioned that teaching may not be necessarily the first choice for lots of young people going and looking into a career, but there are still people who just consider teaching as something they would love to do. They find a lot of fulfillment in it. They've tried it and they love it. A lot of teachers would say that they started their journey just by group study, teaching their peers and their interests. There are still young people who are looking to go into teaching. If any young person is listening to us and want to consider a career in teaching, what would be your one advice for them?
Advising a younger one to go into teaching is like asking me, would you let your younger sister or younger brother go into teaching? That's a tough one. But then in my capacity as a teacher, what I find fulfilling and what I often tend to tell my colleagues is that it's often you get an inner satisfaction when you get to know that you are impacting on the lives of younger ones. You are helping shape the life course of people who see you as a role model, people who see you to be that without you, their life could have taken a different turn. So I would advise the younger one, hey, teaching may not be what you, in terms of salary, but then think about the gratification. And I always tell them, look, it's kind of like enthuse me, or I'm always in awe when I see my student maybe after a session, and then I give them an exercise and then ask them to come back and then report on it. And me sitting back in class and watching how these students fare in my lecture in terms of their presentation, I go like, look, Ellen, you are doing a great job. So I would tell a younger one, once the passion is there, just pursue the teaching profession. It may not be lucrative. You may not get the money. I wouldn't say that your reward will be in heaven. I wouldn't say that. But then think of the reason, you being the reason why a life is saved. You being the reason why you are shaping a whole trajectory, the lifespan of a younger one, just because of the instruction that you provided. So think of the inner reward, think of the inner gratification that you are most likely to get when you become a teacher, and not necessarily based on the external thing. I mean, inner motivation are sometimes very powerful to drive our actions. So if you have that passion for being a teacher, pursue it. You wouldn't regret that you were a teacher.
Yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. If you have the passion to pursue it, and hopefully the balance between intrinsic and extrinsic motive will play out there, while still emphasizing that teachers need better conditions of service.
Exactly.
Now, let's come to continuing professional development. When you look at the spectrum of CPD provision, there is this broad spectrum of ones that are system-led or government-led, and then they stretches back to a hybrid or middle ground, and then one that are completely teacher-led or self-directed. And some do argue that standardized professional development may not consider or meet the unique learning needs of teachers in very different learning contexts, and schools may be different across geographies and cultures. And the question is, how can we strike a balance between system-led professional development and teacher-led or self-directed professional development to meet the learning needs of teachers? Where do we strike that balance?
Okay. So I remember in one of my reading, Gasky, one of the renowned and prolific writer on teacher professional development, talked about the fact that in as much as we are criticizing the traditional CPD approaches, we should not also overlook the fact that at a point we will need them, and that we cannot do away with them completely. There will be certain knowledge that will be better carried out using the traditional or the standardized approaches to professional development. But then, having said that, the deficiencies often that characterize these standardized approaches are such that we cannot also let them be the only sole approaches that we would develop teachers. Other than that, we would rather develop deficient teachers. We rather produce teachers who will be unreflective, who will be not critical in order to transform their practice. But then the essence of CPD is that teachers, after participation, they should be able to transform whatever goes on in their classroom. So personally, if you ask me to, how do we then strike the balance? I would say that let's have a blend. And this is something that I always argue in my writings on teacher CPD. Let's have a blend, and especially within the Ghanaian context, you find out that it's only the standardized CPD availables that are on offer for these teachers. But then its criticism as such that you even wonder if teachers are developed at the end of the day. So let's have a combination of both the standardized CPD, and even where we are using these standardized CPD, like the workshop, the in-service training, the short courses that teachers participate in, the modular programs, let's have it tailored to the specific needs of these teachers. Mm-hmm. So one of the key things is that teachers do go for these sessions, all right. You realize that what they need to do in the classroom, there is always that disjuncture, or it's kind of disconnected with whatever skills and knowledge that the so-called organized one is supposed to provide to them, and what these teachers actually need in the classroom. Now, when it happens like that, ask yourself, what are we learning? And I've had interactions with teachers who tell you that, oh, okay, well, I didn't learn anything from when I participated in A, B, C, and D activity, because what was the content that was taught, I already had knowledge about them. Or it was either the content were not related to what they could use in the classroom, or they already had knowledge of what the content was all about. So let's have a proliferation of opportunities. Let's have a much deeper repertoire of CPD activities that teachers can actually select from, and then also make sure that the organized ones actually target the very needs of these teachers in the classroom. And then let's also allow teachers the flexibility to pursue their own professional development. And if you ask me, I always advocate for, let's allow teachers the autonomy to determine their own professional development pathways, because research has found that if teachers learn themselves, the self-directedness, the informal learning episode, they are much more effective, or they impact greatly on what they do in the classroom session compared to those that are organized, those that are standardized, and they expect teachers to actually participate. So let's allow teachers, and let's have a way of harmonizing this informal or self-directed learning opportunities as constituting teacher CPD options for these teachers. And then finally, let's also embrace collaborativeness when we are talking about teacher professional development for teachers in Ghana. Teachers learn greatly collaboratively. The mentoring approaches, the peer class observation, and sometimes even dialogue during staff common rooms. And it was something that kind of like emerged from my PhD thesis, where teachers kind of like learn significantly during staff meetings. So because the staff meetings then became an opportunity where they could reflectively dialogue about the challenges in their classroom settings. Oh, I was confronted with A, B, C, D when I was teaching X, Y, Z approaches. And then informally, without them knowing, they kind of like, oh, why don't you try this method? Why don't you use this alternative method or pedagogy or strategy? And it's worked so much for these teachers. But then what happened was that teachers do all these things, but then without realizing that it's a way of their professional development. So striking a balance between them, I also think that, especially regarding GES, we should find a way of standardizing this informal learning episode in addition to the standardized CPD that we provide or we offer for teachers. And then lastly, also, I nearly forgot, we should make this standardized on context-based. And you rightfully said in your question, the fact that what will be the need of a teacher in northern sector would definitely vary from the need of a teacher, CPD need or learning need of a teacher in Accra or in central region. So let's make these CPD learning needs, let's contextualize them and provide them accordingly and suitably based on wherever these teachers find themselves. And in doing that, we have a balance, and then we have a very much richer and even variety of CPD opportunities that teachers can freely choose from.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think that was a brilliant overview, and considering both sides of the coin, but equally recognizing the importance of both forms while advocating for balance. Now, in relation to teacher motivation, self-led, self-directed professional learning and informal learning and all that, the National Teaching Council in Ghana did introduce the point-based system for teacher professional development, where teachers are awarded points, what they would call CPD points, based on the activities that teachers are being involved in. And interestingly, this would determine whether teachers are able to renew their license or not. And teachers are required to accumulate at least 20 points each year, irrespective of their rank. But also there are specific points that are needed to get a particular rank or to be able to be eligible for promotion. I would want to know what your opinion on this reform are.
Okay, thank you for the question. And I was particularly happy when I saw that. It was something that, especially with their previous policy on the CPD, the pre-tertiary teacher professional development framework, which came, I think that one came in somewhere 2012. Yeah, that talked about a competency-based approach for teachers' development. And I kind of, in my writings, I provide critique of how that policy, in a way, as enlightening or as laudable as it were in terms of the central tenet in it, how the deficiencies in that policy, and for that matter, the need for a real look at that policy. So when I personally found the points-based system that was introduced somewhere in 2020, I kind of, okay, something has been done and it's in the right path. However, it's not like I enjoy criticizing, but that's the work of what we do. We look for the loopholes kind of thing. So I had a chance to go through this points-based system. And I must say, it's kind of much more detailed. It's kind of much specific. And for me, it's a very first step laying the foundation for how we can develop the teachers, and especially equipping teachers or giving teachers the leeway to select some CPD providers, what they can do. What I find interesting about this point-based system is that it actually has led to an increase or profusion of a lot of CPD providers that are kind of like into providing different CPD activities that teachers can actually select and participate. And then they go back to NTC with the point that is due them to be accredited. And then also, another good thing is that teachers have now become interested in their professional development affair. But then the question is, are we just looking at this points-based system, that as in teachers participating to accrue just the points, or we are looking at what's learning, or what are the so here that we should then overlook the development point. Let's look at teacher learning within these CPD activities. Are teachers learning from these proliferation of activities or services that are currently being provided at their doorstep? Initially, the provision of CPD was seldom, I mean, you could be in school 2 years, 3 years, you wouldn't even get the chance to even go for one workshop or in-service training. But then the story is different now. But then, what are teachers learning? And what mechanisms have you put in place to ensure or to evaluate the kind of learning or the sort of learning that teachers do when they participate in these activities? For me, that's the catch for me, because at the end of the day, merely participating in CPD activities doesn't make you develop. No. When we participate, it doesn't necessarily mean you are developed or you've acquired the skills and what have you. But then what processes do you go through in ensuring that what was learned has been contextualized in the class? And that is the key foundation, or that's the key purpose of CPD. The fact that it must lead to teacher change in practices, teacher change in beliefs, teacher change in attitude, with its concomitant effect that they would transform what they do in the classroom to support students' learning. But then ask yourself, is it what is happening?
Yeah.
I'll leave that for you to answer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite stricken by what you've said, and those are really insightful accounts, and there's a lot to unpack from what you have said. And one thing that I got from what you're saying is that the accumulation of CPD points could, as a byproduct or as an outcome, could lead teachers into seeing professional development as a box-ticking exercise that
exactly
focus on from learning, which is the main goal. So we think of what could be improved, and you did cite that you were criticizing and have professed some recommendations which you see have been taken up. How can we shift the focus from meeting these points as a box ticking and say, okay, I qualify, I meet the point, to actually making the focus on teacher learning? Do you have any suggestions or ideas of?
Okay, I think the first thing we need to even have in mind with that is it's feedback to striking the balance between the standardized one and then the other forms of CPD. Okay, making sure that whatever is provided, one, addressed to the specific need or targeted need of those who are participating in it. Okay, for me, that's the first step, because you can't provide a content to someone who is already full. You cannot, we should first identify what these teachers need to begin with. And for that matter, tax these CPD providers in providing opportunities that directly fit into them. And then also, I would also talk about mechanisms of evaluating. Okay, mechanisms of evaluate, and that has to do with the processes of how these training programs are actually conducted. Because one of the critics of CPD being ineffective is the providers' even mentality and idea that CPD is something that we can do to teachers. Okay, it's something that we can package and something that we can deliver to teachers, but that's not what learning is all about. Okay, so if we want to make it that effective, let's train these teachers on what even makes CPD effective. Because if you do not have knowledge of what makes the CPD effective, how can you then provide an efficacious interventions to address the needs of these teachers? So one, the providers ought to be trained themselves. We need to also come up with a mechanism or a framework that would also guide the design, that will guide the planning, that will guide the implementation of the various CPD interventions that they are putting together. For me, it is very key, because you can overlook even the processes of you conducting your training, and that would run the whole process ineffective. For instance, I've got teachers kind of like recounting the fact that they didn't learn, or they even refused to learn because facilitators of training sessions treated them as though they were kids. Okay, and children learn differently from adults. So you cannot use the same pedagogies for children's training and employ them in a typical when you are using adult learning situation for which teachers fall within it. So adult learners learn differently. So the process of their learning must even differ. But if the service provider has no clue, has no knowledge on how to design it that is suitable to adult learners' context, we are bound to fail. You may think that teachers are excited. You may think that teachers are participating. But then, hey, I mean, I've heard teachers go like, okay, even the point-based system, you can pay. That's alleged anyway. But then we are in Ghana. It's highly possible that teachers can actually pay for participation, but they will not even be there.
Yeah.
So we should put together other mechanisms that will guide the operations of these CPD providers. And for me, one thing is like, let's develop their capacity as well. While as we are talking about developing capacity of teachers to be able to be competent in 21st century classroom, those who are responsible for that development, we should as well have a look at them. Let's develop them on what even constitute effective practice. Let's develop or build their capacity on evaluative tools that they can use. Then they can use the evaluation as a key to track teacher learning. And in so doing, they'll be able to determine the effectiveness of their programs. So that not only do teachers come and participate, let's have an evaluative mechanism being put in place that will track after participation. And when you go into classroom, what goes on in there? Your knowledge prior, during, and then after. And when we do that, we will then be able to kind of like determine if the programs that we are running are effective or if teachers are actually learning from the programs that they are participating in. And I think once we do that, we'll be able to at least have a bridge kind of thing with the point basis, or we'll be able to address some of the issues or concerns that have come up with the implementation of the point-based system.
Yeah, there is a lot. There's a lot that you have said there, starting from the fact that training programs must meet the unique needs of teachers, such that it has to be informed by something like a needs assessment to understand where teachers are, even sometimes could be led by themselves to understand where their learning needs are, such that we do not have a one-size-fits-all program given to teachers, but also looking at what is really meeting their needs, as much as we are balancing this with standardized or across the board training programs. You've also made an important point that I like about the fact that there needs to be quality control in CPD provision. And obviously there has been massive proliferation of CPD providers, but what is the effectiveness? How is it efficient? It's who are checking that the design, implementation, and delivery evaluation of these programs are effective. And you did make an interesting point that just receiving the training alone does not necessarily mean that learning outcomes would be improved. And that leads me to my next question, because there's lots and lots of institutions that continue to run training for teachers. And usually the assumption is that delivering training will lead to improved outcomes. However, this may not always be the case. So especially if CPD providers are listening and they are reflecting on what we have said, how do you think we can work to close the perceived gap between training delivery to teachers and with teachers, and the linkages between this and improve learning outcomes for people?
Okay. I guess the primary outcome of CPD participation is that we after participation, teachers then have to it's all to translate, and then we improve teachers' learning outcome. And as is that some of these things are interspersed with it. So in achieving that, one thing that I will repeat saying is that we should make sure that CPD 1 kind of addresses the need of students. We should, in literature, there are actually ways, or researchers have actually come up with ways of we can ensure that CPD is effective in attaining the general or the main outcome of it, that is improving learning among students. So one of the things that they talk about is that it must be content focused. content focus in the sense that it must kind of like address, as I said earlier, the peculiar needs of teachers. It must address the peculiar needs of teachers. And another thing that they also talk about in literature, it's also the fact that it ought to be collaborative. It's ought to be collaborative, and that it ought to be active learning. And when I was explaining my earlier point, I talked about the fact that even that when I was talking even about adult learning and employing adult learning principles in designing effective intervention, active learning, that's where active learning comes in. The fact that teachers don't participate, and then we have facilitators delivering the session as though the teachers do not have any prior knowledge whatsoever. Teachers are not tabula rasas. They have rich experiences that they come to learning situations with. Okay, so as providers, let's draw on these prior or learning experiences of these teachers and involve them actively during the learning process. For all you know, one thing, and it came up in my previous paper when I was looking at factors that motivate teachers to even participate. And the fact that they are involved in learning, they are involved in the processes of their learning, it was a motivation for them. Not necessarily you giving them money or giving them incentives after participation, but then the fact that the facilitators saw that, hey, let's co-construct the knowledge together. Let me actively involve you in the learning process. It was a huge thing for these teachers. So we should also imbibe active learning when we are design or when providers are providing these learning services, CPD services or interventions for these teachers. And another thing they also talk about is coherence. Coherence in the sense that it should not be devoid of something that is meaningless to these teachers. Okay, it must be within a certain context. And in whole CPD knowledge, the role of context is highly kind of like illumined, that context influence CPD, and context has been explained in different areas. So when you are delivering the intervention, consider the context of these teachers. The school characteristics is important, the community is important, the individual teacher characteristics, the differences that they come into learning situation, they all embodies context that in a way influence how well they will receive the CPD learning outcomes. Okay, so if we want it to be effective to change teachers, for them to also change what they do in the classroom to affect students' learning, we should be able to imbibe these principles, make it content focused, employ much more active learning pedagogies or strategies, must be coherent, and then also consider duration. Duration in the sense that it should be of sustained duration, it should be of sustained time, so that we don't go for CPD, let's say in a semester, you don't go for one CPD, an hour CPD sections or 2 hour CPD section, and you think it's enough for teachers to transform knowledge, his or her teaching practices. No, CPD is an ongoing endeavor. Okay, so we should be treated, we should view it as such, and make sure that teachers have that ample time on daily basis to develop. And that's why the organized ones or the standardized ones ought to be supplemented with the informal. So you realize that the informal approach is kind of like happens at the interstices of teachers' work. So not necessarily teachers will not wait for the next CPD sections to also go in order to learn, but then on their own accord, they will be able to learn as they even work in the during the classroom settings as well. And let me also add that duration doesn't necessarily mean when we also increase the number of hours for CPD activities, it's most likely to be effective. That doesn't also happen that way, but then it should be sustained. It should be sustained, and it should be an ongoing thing. So I believe that when we have all these in mind, we'll be able, the intervention or the activities will be able to increase teachers' knowledge and skills. Teachers will be able to gain much more meaningful knowledge and learning from it, with which they can change their classroom practices for it to lead to improve students' learning.
Yeah, that is a whole list of really insightful and actionable advice for CPD providers. And I was nodding and following because there's a lot to unpack there and really good point. Thank you for sharing. And I am sure that audience, especially people involved in CPD provision, would pick some good notes from what you have said. In the interest of time, I would end with two questions and then we close it. The next one is journaling education as of now. I think when you ask most people what is the big thing hitting education now, it is technology.
And yes.
2023 GEM report is dedicated to technology, and technology is rapidly changing the face of education. And so it feels as though it's difficult to have a conversation on education without
technology.
So in your opinion, how can we use technology to ensure that it is bridging rather than widening the gap in opportunities, especially between urban and well-resourced schools and teachers, and then rural and low-resource schools and teachers?
Thank you very much. I mean, I would have been surprised if we had ended the session without talking about opportunities that technology provides. I mean, technology is a big thing. Now it's the buzzword. Talk of chat AI, chat GPT, and what have you. They are revolutionizing education. And in the same way, we can harness on its potency in delivering effective CPD for teachers. Now, ask me how. Now, I would bring in technology here because in my paper on, I think it was published, it's also based on teacher motivation, where I argue for the need to look at motivation as an investment on the side of teachers rather than something that is done to teachers' intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. In that paper, what came up was that teachers even had to travel a very long distance to maybe educational office to participate in a CPD program. So, and that's the main reason that when they go, their main intention or their motivation is what incentive is to be accrued from that participation, not what I am going to learn.
Yeah.
And it's understanding. If I travel so many miles, sometimes they explain to me that that road were unmotorable. So all these things add to their investment thing. So if I participate, I should get something to commensurate my efforts that I came in with. So then it's not the learning that kind of motivating them, but then the incentive, how much the transport that you give to me, the certificate that is to validate my participation or appearance, that's what matters. So that's what will make that teacher learning better. And I think in that essence, we can bridge on, or we can harness on technology's potential. Okay, so now we can have teachers to have access to variety or CPD, just as what we are doing. You needed not to have come to UJ. It's technology. Let's have a model that embraces technology so that we'll be able to reach wide number of teachers and get them participating in it, other than teachers commuting from wherever they are to whether education head office or district capitals or the urban areas to come and seek CPD opportunities. You can talk about the fact that in Ghana, not all also regions are connected in terms of stability when it comes to connectivity. In that case, we do a proper analysis. So for those regions that internet connectivity becomes a problem, we can do face-to-face, not necessarily having all of them traveling down to come and do or participate in CPD. It will be a kind of like a daunting task for them. And in terms of costs, we can also use technology to also bridge that cost that teachers have to bear when it has to do with their technology. So for me, I have and I had that position from a study that it's currently under review for consideration for publication, where I was looking at participation in distance education programs as continued professional development conduits Okay. And then aside from the exorbitant monies that teachers paid for their upgrading program, yet they come to classroom, and then there is that there's no synergy between the knowledge they claim they have acquired and what they do in the classroom. And to me, it's kind of problematic. So as a way, instead of us kind of like even that continuing education, the top courses, the UCC, Winneba, and whatever are kind of like kind of rolling up for these teachers, and the fact that they even have to leave and then go to centers for face-to-face lectures. Let's use technology, and in so doing, let's have the courses in bits and sizes for teachers to take and at their own disposal. Okay, so they will not necessarily have to leave the classroom. And believe me, when they leave the classroom, students suffer. And research says that there are lots of instructional hours when teachers leave for professional development activities. So in order to deal with that, technology can help us do it. Let's mount up bits and sizes courses that teachers can self-directly undertake it on their own without necessarily convening at study centers. When they have online submit, they have to go to the university to go submit those print-based distance education program. Let's phase them out, okay? And then for teachers, let's embrace technology. It can be blended approaches where technology side would feature in, so that we'll be able to support teachers' development, and it will be cost effective, and will be able to reduce absenteeism that emanates out of teachers having to leave their post to go for DE programs or to go and participate in CPD programs in a district office or in Accra or in other urban areas. So for me, CPD now is technology. Technology provides so many ways or opportunities that we can harness to support teacher development.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, I think you spoke very passionately as an advocate for education deployment, which I can sense from what you've said. And you did mention about making content bit-sized, and I really enjoyed that because I take a lot of online courses, and the one I took previously, the McKinsey Forward program, and each lesson would take you about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. That's pointed. I enjoyed it, and like you complete this at your own convenience. So it's like a huge lesson content, but broken down into very small bits that you finish them once in a short while, which I like. But in the deployment of technology, there are equally concerns about rural areas, internet penetration, certain areas where if you want to make a call, you need to find a tree or stand to get internet connection. There are issues with some teachers not having laptop or smartphone, or some who even have it but do not know how to operate it. And so real challenges faced, especially by marginalized or rural communities. And I think that as much as we are rolling out technology, it's also important to look at how we can support communities that may not be better placed to access or utilize these technologies to be included, so they are not left behind. But I have really enjoyed listening to you on the insightful reflections that you have shared. Before we let you go, which is the last thing, especially as an academic having lots of conversations and publications, I would be interested in you talking to us about any recent publications or work advocacy or discourses that you are having that you would be interested in sharing, which could be in relation to continued professional development or beyond that. We would be interested in what you have to.
Okay. I think I'll just talk briefly about my past, this year. Okay, so I have an article that was published that looked at reframing motivation as investment in teacher continued professional development. So that was where I took issues of teachers having to invest in CPD activities where their locality and having to even transport themselves, commute from a very unmotorable road to rural centers coming. And it talks about how motivating teachers to participate extend beyond the intrinsic factors and then the extrinsic factors, and for the fact that there are other social contextual issues that we need to look at in terms of power, in terms of teacher agency, in terms of teacher characteristics. All these interplay and influences teachers' motivation to participate in CPD activities. So it's an interesting piece that when you read, it's kind of like take our minds off or away from the normal look at what motivates teachers. Is it intrinsic money? It's extrinsic? No, it actually has a much more, it limits the complexities involving teachers participating in CPD activities. So you can have a look. And then the other one looks at teacher learning from continuing professional development activities and a social cultural perspective. So that also talks about how learning actually comes out from participating. And it's also kind of interlaced with my earlier arguments that by merely participating in CPD activities does not necessarily guarantee that a teacher will be developed. And that for learning to occur, there are interplay of so many factors. So in that study, I was able to develop a model that takes teachers through the journey of transformation from when a teacher participates and what factors mediate that learning for a teacher to be able to contextualize that CPD knowledge in the classroom situation. I also think that that would be an important paper to also have a look at, a read at. And Karen, I think my next paper, which is forthcoming, also looks at how we can strengthen distance education as an effective CPD tool for teachers. Because oftentimes we have teachers participate in continuing education programs that do not have any bearings whatsoever. So it also targets to, whilst we are asking the providers provide a content-focused CPD, we should also make sure that continuing education, higher education institutions are also providing content that are of relevance, because these DE programs have been run for a very long time, and teachers express that they do not find any difference as to even how they were trained, and then any new thing. Of course, picked a few things. Then the issue of whether they were able to contextual or use that knowledge in classroom setting, it's also a different thing. So that's also an upcoming paper that will be interesting to have a read. And finally, I'm looking at designing a model on effective CPD. And I conceptualized this research with the idea of after I read this, the new CPD policy framework of the point-based system, and then how we are having so many CPD providers. So that I generated or I conceptualized that idea from. So it's also forthcoming that looks at designing effective CPD for teachers. So the idea is like to have teachers speak to themselves, speak to me about what they even consider as effective, because teachers' voices are important educational resources. So in a way, if we're looking at how to make CPD effective, we cannot do so without looking at the voices, without looking at the perspectives of teachers themselves. So this will be the two upcoming projects that I'm currently working on, and then I'll be happy to share once it's been published and it's in the public domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can promise they will be very insightful, because I have read some of your papers and found them really insightful and interesting. So I would say thank you for the groundbreaking work you are doing. And I'm very impressed by your work and the contribution you are making in academia and shaping policy and practice. It's been a pleasure having you on the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast. Thank you so much, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Senyo. Thank you.